In this lesson, we continue to study the principle of historic building protection and utilization, mainly aiming at the principles of integrity and compatibility. First, let's learn the principle of integrity. Urban historic buildings and areas reflect the features of city history in a whole and show the typical features of a city in a certain historical period, reflecting the development of city history, in which the building and the environment have the value sublimation along with the development of city and the progress of human beings. So people feel the need to protect them. Only a complete historical style can reflect the typical characteristics of a certain period of history. Only in a specific environment can people taste the region and the value of the existence of some buildings. Out of their particular environment, their value is lost. It is hard to imagine the effect of its isolated existence after the flow-water villa diverted the stream and cut down the trees. The preservation of historic buildings requires the integrity and unity of historic buildings and environment. Only the unity and integrity can make the flawed individual sublimate into a meaningful and valuable whole, which is the first point of the integrity of historic building protection. Second, the protection of historic buildings is also a dynamic process. The preservation of historic buildings should be viewed from the perspective of sustainable development. The following is discussed in a hierarchy of the principle of integrity in the preservation of historic buildings. The city is a whole system, and the components of the city are a whole. The combination of buildings forms the city, but the city is not the simple superposition and mechanical combination of buildings. For the historical environment of the city, it is embodied as from a single historical buildings to historical location, block, and complex, and then to the overall historical environment of the city. Each level covers the previous level, and each level has its own characteristics. As the point of activating the city's historical district, the developed and reused historic buildings will gradually drive the development of the whole region. The renewal and change of many areas will promote the city's continuous renewal and development. The protection and design of historic buildings should be based on the whole city's angle, dealing with various contradictions and coordinating all kinds of relationships in a comprehensive perspective. The important judgment of the whole principle is whether the design conforms to the city plan. First, the principle of integrity requires that the restoration and design of historic buildings must comply with the requirements of urban planning. The restoration of historic buildings should be treated from the perspective of urban development. Urban planning should clearly define the depth of historic building restoration design, including whether to allow the addition of floors, whether to change the style and detail of the facade according to the location and area of the building. The extent to which the changes must be kept as they are, and the appropriate proportion of the changes, which will also serve as the fundamental criteria for supporting and measuring the specific design strategies and techniques. No matter how superb the design techniques are, they must be based on the city's perspective, obey the city planning and the city's historical feature protection premise. Secondly, the principle of integrity also shows that the historical environment is protected while restoring historic buildings. Dr. Richard Neghardy, advisor to UNESCO's Asia-Pacific Culture Ministry, said protecting historic buildings is not just protecting a brick or wall, but most importantly, protecting its essence and culture. Protecting buildings must be accompanied by protection of the surrounding environment and planning of surrounding facilities. The ultimate goal of protection is to provide a better living environment for people. Precisely because of the surrounding environment is a part of the whole historical characteristics of the historic buildings. It is very important to identify, maintain, and protect the surrounding environmental characteristics of historic buildings. The surroundings of a historic building include, first, transportation facilities like walk walls, roads, parking lots, etc. Second, plants like trees, shrubs, fields, herbs, etc. Third, landform like terraces, platforms, slopes, etc. Fourth, surrounding building facilities like lamp posts, fences, steps, etc. Fifth, ornaments like carvings, statues, monuments, etc. Sixth, water system like fountains, streams, pools, lakes, etc. Seventh, underground resources of archaeological value. If you pay attention to your surroundings, you will find historic buildings have been protected to a certain extent, but the environmental protection of historic buildings has often not received the attention it deserves. Let us take an example. For those students who have been to the Xuankong Temple in Datong, Shanxi Province, did you wait in line to step on the temple hanging on the cliff? Have you noticed the view below? Xuankong Temple had been a mountain of broken stones for thousands of years. However, the comprehensive environmental management project of Xuankong Temple several years ago, lawn graying of 5,000 square meters of the site and the temple makes the surrounding environment of Xuankong Temple suddenly lose the sense of history. Under the green lawn, Xuankong Temple seems to have lost the sense of scale like an architectural model. In the future practice, you must treat the historic building protection design with holistic vision, thought, and method. What is the compatibility principle of historic building protection and utilization? You should be clear. In the design of preservation and reuse of historic buildings, it mainly involves function renewal and overall form renewal. The function satisfies the basic use requirement, while the form it towards emotion and context appeal. Both are subject to the present state of historic buildings. New functional space and new form placement will involve the coordination between the old and the new. The principle of compatibility is the principle we should follow when facing the conflict between the old and the new. First, let's look at the compatibility of functions. In the process of functional renewal, the matching degree between the space capacity of the historical building itself and the new function directly influence the functional relationship between the building and the city and the survival of building itself. The Bala Charter has long pointed out the importance of compatibility in functional renewal. He noted that the new functional space placement should be fully respectful of the cultural importance of the site, with little or no impact on its cultural importance. We can understand that the relationship between architecture and city is connected through function. The newly inserted function is the bridge to make historic buildings return to city system. Whether the city function can be effectively connected, the functional compatibility is the basis of regeneration of historical buildings. Furthermore, the new functional space should take fully into account the spatial characteristics and the present structure of the historical building ontology. In the process of intervention, the stability and safety of the building structure should be guaranteed so as to avoid physical damage, and the new and old space should be a constant state of continuity and mutual response. For example, in the regeneration of industrial buildings, there is greater flexibility between its space capacity and a large span structure, and greater plasticity in functional renewal, and the effect of compatibility between new and old spaces is easily achieved. However, in the process of renewal, the intervention measures should be made according to the characteristics of the historical buildings, such as the traditional residential houses and other structures with large space restrictions. Its functional compatibility. The compatibility of the whole form is often expressed as the relationship between the new and old body and forms, which involves the materials, volume, proportion, style, and detail of the building. In practice, designers often fall into the muddy pond of ancient and modern styles. However, numerous examples have proved that there is no clear line between modern and traditional. And with the decline of heroic modernism, this line becomes more and more blurred. Tradition can be deduced by modern means, and modernity can also be reached in history. Pritzker Prize winner Alvaro Sizer, whose works often focus on creating a deep connection between modern design and historical environments, is still working at the age of 88, who believes that there is no architectural distinction between modern and traditional, but a continuum that runs through history. Even when there are breaks or jumps, they cannot shake the continuance of human civilization. These breaks are fresh at first, but over time we will still see behind them the basic continuum. Nothing completely new or a fractured leap of language. In this picture, the Galashiel Center of Contemporary Art, completed by Sizer in 1993, is a complex site in a historical complex. Sizer's design begins with the site, a perfect interpretation of form and materials. Just as the Chinese culture emphasizes similarity in spirit rather than in form, it is necessary to grasp the relationship that makes it compatible to achieve symbiosis among the elements. Therefore, when facing the interchange of space form between the new and old buildings, we should not be limited to the one-sided continuation of symbols. As long as we find the clear connection and interpret it on the basis of it, all the things from home and abroad can be used by us. In this section, we mainly discuss the integrity and compatibility principles of historical buildings protection design.